Welcome to the Black Etc. podcast, a podcast about how ideas and culture spread amongst Black Americans, especially outside mass media. I'm your host, Ian Youssef. I have a great guest today, Dr. Constance Bailey, who's Assistant Professor of African American Literature and Folklore at Georgia State University. She's also the digital media editor of the American Folklore Society. One of her recent books she's finishing up editing with a couple others is Get It While It's Hot, Gas Station, Roadside, and Convenience Cuisine in the U.S. South. She's also finishing up The No Limit Reader, a book on the history and importance of No Limit in Southern hip-hop and culture. She's also finishing up her manuscript, which is called In Search of Our Mother's Folklore, The Sankofa Aesthetic and the Black Folktastic, so be on the lookout for that. We were all over the place in this one in the best way. We spoke a little bit about Southern versus Black cuisine. We talked about roadside gas station convenience food and why it's so prevalent in the South still. Dr. Bailey also laid out why she came up with the term Folktastic to combine Black folklore and Black fantasy elements within stories and narratives of the various peoples of the African diaspora. A large part of what we spoke about, however, was digital media, digital culture, Black meme culture, preserving Black culture in the social media and digital age. My favorite part of the discussion is when we were going back and forth about the different sayings and proverbs that our elders passed down to us. So I thought that was pretty fun. I won't waste any more time. Let's get right to it. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. I'm here today with Dr. Constance Bailey, Assistant Professor of African American Literature and Folklore at Georgia State University. Dr. Bailey is also digital media editor at the American Folklore Society. Her new book, which she's editing, is coming out soon. Get It While It's Hot, Gas Station, Roadside, and Convenience Cuisine in the U.S. South. And she's also, like my parents, like my people, a native of Mississippi. She happens to be a native of Natchez. Welcome, Dr. Bailey. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Your dissertation, you expanded for a manuscript, which is called The Black Folktastic, Black Speculation and the Sankofa Aesthetic. First, what does the word folktastic mean as you use it? And if you can share, what's the central idea behind the manuscript?
Oh, okay. So this is a great question and one that I should say that I have changed the name of this project numerous times. But, so before I answer that question, so the current iteration of the title, and I think the one that I will stay with, is In Search of Our Mother's Folklore, the Sankofa Aesthetic and the Black Folktastic. So
okay,
Folktastic is still a huge part of it. And I mean, one of the things I think that academics just do in general, we try to coin a thing. They say there's nothing new under the sun, right? But we're trying to sort of repackage or talk about things in a different way. And so one of the things that struck me in a lot of the Black speculative texts that I was reading, especially Black women, is that they are drawing on folklore and the fantastic. So quite obviously it's a portmanteau word that combines folklore and fantastic. And so thinking about, again, fantasy tropes that draw on different groups' mythology, different groups' lore, as opposed to science fiction that deal with things that are scientific possibilities or improbabilities, but, could possibly be in fantastic text. We see creatures, mythological beings. We see just, think about any of the Marvel movies, basically. But so we have these fantastic elements, but many of them, at least for Black women's texts, are drawing on the fantasy is specifically ground in different groups' folklore, right? So different ideas about, for example, something like this idea of what my grandmother would call a hag, right? Saying you've been ridden by a hag. But we see in Nalo Hawkinson's work entities that are essentially, I think Sukoyant is the word in Trinidad, but, either succubus or an incubus. sort of kind of a vampiric spirit, right? Things that are, sort of sucking the lifeblood. She has that figure in a lot of her texts, right? And so that is very much drawing on folklore from Trinidad and Tobago, but also Black American folklore. A lot of diasporic groups have kind of similar entities where there's an old woman who, is called a witch or called whatever. So that really, when we think about the folktastic, just thinking about these different entities that we see represented in fantastic texts, but that in fact, looking at and establishing a lineage between various folk traditions that are inspiring those fantastical entities.
You often research and write about Southern Black foodways. For you, what's the difference between Southern food and soul food?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think they're often conflated. I think that is probably because of, after, well, even during slavery, but, certainly afterward, the preponderance, for lack of a better word, but the concentration of Black Americans in the South. And you can see popular films like The Help, which is not a great, probably, lots of white savior trope stuff going on there. But this idea of, sort of Black women running the kitchens of Southern white households. And so I think, again, because of the concentration of Black Americans in the South, I think there's a lot of overlap. So that's what I would say. I also say, or at least when I teach Southern foodways, I ask this question about when we talk about the South. And so even extending that question to Southern food, are we talking about things that are culturally Southern or geographically Southern? Because those are two different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so no one would argue that Texas is in the South. But when people say Southern food, they don't mean Tex-Mex, right? They don't mean, and even thinking about Louisiana, right? So because of its Cajun and Creole influence, a lot of times when people say Southern food, they don't necessarily mean Louisiana because that's its own kind of distinct food tradition, right? And so there's that first thing that we kind of have to establish when we say Southern food. What in fact do we mean? We are really specifically thinking about sort of a cultural identity that is, again, often shared with Black food traditions. We think about a lot of fried dishes. We think about starches, we think, the dressings, the mac and cheeses of the world. And I think, the only, to me, sort of difference is when we think about kind of culturally Southern things that aren't, let's say, inspired by quote unquote soul food. I think you have sometimes this aesthetic of Southern gentility. So something like the mint julep, right, which would be considered a Southern drink that sometimes either because of popular representations of Southern white women drinking a particular thing or eating a particular thing, you get an association with the South that is not necessarily Black Southerners. But again, for the most part, I think 9 out of 10, quote unquote Southern foods, if you were to just name them, I think most people would say, oh, that's quote unquote soul food. Right now, we could argue about what soul food is too, but that's also a whole other distinction. But yeah, I think there's a great deal of overlap, and I would dare say just because Southern food is influenced by and was prepared by a lot of Black folks would be the argument I would make. So
Yeah. I mean, we come up on this problem anytime we're trying to use genre or categories for stuff, right? It fails us once we drill
oh,
down to the specific.
yeah, for sure.
I mean, I often think about it in terms of marketing, right? So
Yeah,
when, let's say, a white chef is marketing their restaurant food, they're not calling it soul food typically. They're probably calling it Southern food.
mm-hmm.
And then there are some Black chefs who may shy away from the term soul food and prefer the term Southern food or neither term, to be honest.
Yeah, it also does largely depend, of course, on the cuisine that you're preparing, right? Because,
Mm-hmm.
if they're a chef, with culinary training or expertise in different types of cuisine, they may in fact not be preparing what we would think of as quote unquote, soul food or Southern food for that matter. So yeah, but you're absolutely right about genre, which is interesting to think about how, like I think of it as a literary thing, but it's so, so relevant even when you think about categorizing restaurants and food and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah. And try and talk to a great Black musician or great any musician. They don't want to be labeled anything,
Oh
you
yeah.
know?
Oh, sure. Of course.
Yeah. So your new book, which I mentioned, Get It While It's Hot, it focuses on the unlikely places Southerners get convenience food. So places that folks outside the South may look sideways at, like gas stations, for example. What is it about the South that has produced this phenomenon and had it maintained and persisted to this day? And why does that interest you?
So first, I should say the book is co-edited by two good friends and colleagues who that we all met in graduate school at the University of Missouri many years ago. So I'm not going to reveal my age. So we'll just say I should say it was a little bit ago. But Dr. Shelley Ingram, who's down at University of Louisiana, and Dr. Casey Kaiser, who's at University of Arkansas. So yeah, we came across the project. The inspiration, I think, was just like an internet meme or something, or somebody posted something like, Southern gas stations be like,
Mm-hmm.
and there's this spread of food. And we said, we were just at a conference. I was like, we should write a book about that. And so, and then, the rest, as they say, is history. I think, so there's two parts to this, right? I've always been, I think the farthest north, and you can't really call it north, but, I lived in Missouri, Columbia, Missouri. And so, of course, obviously visited all parts of the country, but I don't necessarily drive in those places. I'm, flying in or something like that. So I don't know how the interstate systems have supported the growth of these, again, mom and pop restaurants or roadside vendors, that sort of thing. So I'm just not familiar enough. But I would say, just in terms of thinking about location, because one of the things that we do talk about, and I don't know if we have a specific essay that speaks to it, but we certainly mentioned in the introduction roadside vendors. And in fact, my essay is about my neighborhood candy lady who was also a tamale vendor.
Mm-hmm.
Just the climate, right? You're not going to be in upstate New York selling watermelons or peanuts or whatever on the side of the road. Just most of the year, it's probably not. The weather's not going to be conducive to that, right? So I think that becomes at least a part of it, right? At least in some of those impromptu food spaces, there's just like logistics and of the time and place, right? You just can't, I think. And also a lot of the roadside vendors, at least the ones we kind of talk about, they are, if they're not growing it themselves, and of course are working with some, local person who doesn't have a large industrial farm, who just has smaller things, but the climate essentially is conducive to people being able to grow fruit and watermelon and have that set up on the side of the road to sell their stuff. So again, some of it has to do with just, hey, climate wise, people probably aren't able to grow or have that much land in the city to be growing vegetables in such a way that they can do a pop-up roadside stand. But in terms of the like interstate, like gas stations, right? And other kind of roadside things. I mean, I think there's an interesting, it's not a report, but it might be like a Forbes article or something that we talk about the Waffle House Index, right? And how they kind of pop up after hurricanes and stuff. And just, I don't know if their headquarters are in Georgia or something, but they're located somewhere in the South. And the vast concentration of those types of franchise restaurants, which would also constitute, I think, a type of convenience cuisine, not that we explore at great depth, but they're just concentrated in the South. I think maybe because of, again, their headquarters, because of their clientele. So it is something about the Southern traveler that I still can't quite I don't know that we got to the sort of bottom of it, right? But of course, in terms of metrics, and cost of living being lower in many parts of the South, but education and health and other indicators of, how quote unquote well or how thriving the populace is doing are often lower in Southern states, right?
Mm-hmm.
My home state of Mississippi has actually had a kind of miraculous turnaround in terms of its educational statistics here in the last 5 or 6 years. But, historically, the things that we associate with poverty, which has a lot to do with people, either not having access to transportation, needing to be able to go to a corner store or get something from a gas station because they don't have the means to get to a major grocery store to purchase, what would be considered a sort of healthier fare. So there are certainly some socioeconomic factors that are driving the concentration of this type of industry or these types of businesses in the South. So yeah, I don't know, it's not a one-to-one correlation, but it certainly has an effect. And I don't know if that kind of gets to the answer to your question, but at least I think that's a part of it.
Yeah. So I live in the DC area, so a lot of Northern Virginia places too. Up here, what we get mostly are remnants. So like Royal Farms, they sell chicken at the gas station. There's like a handful of places kind of like cult places where they sell food like tacos or something
Mm-hmm.
from the gas station. But mostly that's, I guess, probably farther south.
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually just talking to my aunt about when we were kids visiting her in LA. She used to have us shuck peas.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Okay. Yeah. Now, is she from the South
she
originally?
is. She is.
Oh,
She's from Mississippi as well.
oh, hey, there you go. Good people.
So we used to shuck peas to pay for, them taking us to Disneyland or Magic
Oh,
Mountain or
sure.
whatever.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I finally asked her, I was like, where did you get all those peas from? And she said it was a roadside vendor. They used to get crates of them from roadside vendors. This is in LA. you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Well, yeah, but LA would also have a warmer climate. It would be great if we could get some funding to expand our research because I think we would love to. I mean, we just happen to be Southerners and we just happen to admire and appreciate the kind of industriousness of these folks that we, see making something out of nothing, proverbially. But I think we would love to do like more interstate travel throughout the country to be like, actually, here is this in this particular region because we know that there are going to be, there are going to be gas stations everywhere, right? Because of the interstate. But I'd be curious to see sort of what constitutes meals in those places. Yeah.
Right. I think there also has to be some level of trust, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Between the people who are making the food, because again, I tell people I eat food from gas stations, I eat food from roadside. Certain folks look at me askance, like, what are you doing? Like, that's not safe, all of that stuff. Yeah. I
yeah.
want to call out, this was a while ago, the best barbecue I had when I lived in DC. I was in Southeast, and there was this brother who used to make barbecue on the side, like a makeshift garbage can kind of,
Okay.
grill
Yeah.
on the weekends. He used to be out there by a school, and that was the best barbecue, and I can't find him. I have no idea where he went, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. That's always the bad thing about that. I had a similar experience where I saw somebody, I looked like they probably had a food truck or something that approximated that. But they were just parked in the back of like a parking lot or something. And I stopped one time and that stuff was so freaking delicious. And I would just start, it almost felt like I was stalking that gas station or whatever, just be driving by it. I was like, oh, where are they? I don't see them anymore. So yeah, no, I've had that experience.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about the importance of digital media in preserving Black folklore?
Yeah. So I mean, that's interesting. So, one of the projects that I'm working on now, and actually should check in to see if people have submitted things. So, I'm curating some essays for a food journal the American Folklore Society produces called Digest. And the call for papers that I crafted was really thinking about this idea of folklore and digital media. And so the call says something like, and you will remember this Shirley Caesar's sermon being edited and remixed by
Mm-hmm.
someone.
Mm-hmm.
So the call for paper says something like it's something like beans, greens, potatoes, tomatoes, and then the subtitle is digital foodways and virality or something like that. And so essentially it's taking two of my, interests in terms of foodways and also folklore and thinking about how the digital space is helping preserve that or, like explore that. And so that in and of itself, I think is a thing that people don't think about, in terms of when we're talking about folklore, we're talking about tradition. And what digital media does is create new ways for people it creates new traditions. So the internet meme, for example. And so, again, I've said papers that are exploring memes about patty pies or if you think about the crying Jordan meme, but that is a way that we communicate meaning and people of a certain generation understand, what, any particular memes that speak to Black people's identity. So the digital meme in and of itself constitutes its own tradition, right? And so I think that the internet is extremely invaluable because one of the things that is happening, and I'm not going to even take credit for this idea, Dr. Stacey Patton, who has a wonderful kind of social media presence, was recently talking about the need for us to, because of the erasure of libraries and this attempt to erase documented history, digital mechanisms are even more important for preserving tradition. So digital storytelling becomes its own type of archive. So I just think in general, right, the digital space is allowing us to preserve some traditions that are intentionally being erased. So, in any type of folklore, again, even something like food waste, which doesn't seem like you could kind of capture that with the digital space, but you really can because people are, again, thinking about and using the internet in really, really creative ways, i.e., remixing Shirley Caesar's song or sermon.
I was also thinking, you're right about, libraries closing, attacks on physical history even, and the need to preserve this stuff digitally. But there's also the pitfall of media consolidation. These media companies can cut
Hmm.
off access at any time and you have no access to it. So like, I guess there are other pitfalls or things you have to deal with if you are going to go the digital media route and talk about preservation, right? So there's pros and cons for everything, right?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And, definitely for those of us who are doing kind of, I mean, I'm not really doing archive work, but I argue that the body is an archive, and
Mm-hmm.
we have these embodied experiences that we carry in our bones. But yeah, I mean, external hard drives, you know what I'm saying? It's just like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I try to, back things up because you never know, to your point. I don't know when one of these conglomerates is going to go into, when my Dropbox is going to evaporate or be, bought out or something. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, you do have to be super, super careful with preserving knowledge. But I also think, I mean, the internet, again, to go back to like the crying Jordan meme or just any of those things that were, I mean, they're still, I don't know what the new one is because I'm not on social media as much as I would like to be. But they're just, we're creating and using the internet in such fun ways.
Yeah.
Black people are just amazing, I tell you. But I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure. But anyway, so those constitute new traditions, is what I'm trying to say. Like
Right.
so to think about, for example, something that I heard all the time growing up: "Don't let your mouth write a check that your ass can't cash." That's a
Mm-hmm.
proverb that I've tried to use with my kids, but they don't come from a check writing culture. So on some level, these kind of verbal traditions, are, I think, again, are becoming digital. So they might be communicating a similar meaning, but through a very different process because, again, some of the things that were tried and true or made sense in my time don't make sense for them.
Right. So I thought of two things. One, we talked about the companies and the whims and them being able to just snatch stuff away from you that you don't own. It doesn't have to be nefarious, right? Just technology. I'm sure some folks have a lot of 8 tracks or cassette
Well,
tapes or
yeah, sure.
CDs, and computers don't even come with CDs, CD-ROMs
Oh,
anymore,
I know
CD
it.
players. So like, technology changes. And even if you have something, it may not be able to be converted easily.
Mhm.
The other thing I was thinking of in terms of digital is that now with AI and people reproducing stuff that may not be real or, for
Mhm.
nefarious purposes or whatever,
Mhm.
that's another thing to have to contend with is digital blackface, people creating stuff
Mhm.
about black people, which you're already seeing actually. You're seeing
Mhm.
people
Oh,
create fake videos, racist videos and memes about black men, women, whatever.
mhm.
So yeah, that's just another thing.
Yeah. No, great point. That's a great point.
Can you give one of your favorite examples of a black tradition or piece of lore migrating in interesting ways before the internet? And then an example of one of those traditions circulating after. You've given us like some of the after the digital memes and stuff. So let's focus on before the internet.
Yeah, pre-internet. Ooh, that's a good one. I feel like I thought about this question. You know what? I probably will go back to. Oftentimes, when I give talks, depending on what the nature of the talk is, I will start with quotes from my grandma. But they're not really quotes from my grandma. They're just, they're just proverbs. But that is a type of verbal tradition that was really, really pervasive when I was growing up. And even Barry White had a song, "Practice What You Preach," right? That's a proverbial expression. But my grandma had some great ones. "You got to shit or get off the pot." "Don't take sand to the beach." These
Hmm.
are things that, again, I try to use them with my children and they often stare at me like, "Don't cut off your nose to spite your face." And they're just like, "What?" What are you talking about? And so I think the way that when you grow up around older people, that is something that you kind of, I think, naturally become accustomed to. So then linguistically, you don't even have to try to sort of break down, like, okay, what is this? What is the literal meaning versus symbolically versus how am I supposed to understand this? Because you're so used to speaking in that way. Proverbs, I think, are a very poetic type of way to communicate meaning and wisdom.
Yeah.
And now again, because it's not so many, I'll blame it on modernity. We'll just say not any specific thing, but we don't necessarily live in those type of extended communities, extended families. I know my children certainly didn't. I moved away, so they weren't necessarily around their elders in the way that I was. And so again, when I use that kind of language, they often don't get it. And I'm trying to indoctrinate is the wrong word, but I'm trying to cultivate a love of Proverbs. I'm trying to help them cultivate a love of Proverbs, but it just may not be their thing. But it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking about my mother, again, also from Mississippi. She used to say, so like, let's say we would come in and our room was a mess. She would say, it looks like the wreck of the Hesperus up in here. And so
That's a good one.
for a long time, I thought that was like a local southern Mississippi black folks thing, that they were talking about like a ship that had crashed in the Gulf or something. It was only later that I realized it was, it's a piece of lore probably popularized in a narrative poem by Longfellow, and that
Mhm.
maybe she read it in school or something or whatever. But that was something that they used to say. I had no idea where it came from, but it kind of migrated to
Oh yeah,
us.
that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. What are you currently working on that you haven't mentioned already?
Oh gosh. What am I not working on? It's probably very apparent that like I have some I was gonna say undiagnosed. I don't it's not undiagnosed, it's maybe untreated or something, but my ADHD has me all over the place. So one project that we're trying to wrap up that's been kind of it's been a while because there are so many other things that have been happening. But that is it's an edited collection called The No Limit Reader, Music, Place, and Space in the Gulf South.
Mm,
And so it was inspired by I think when I saw Juvenile's Tiny Desk, Juvenile and Manny Fresh on Tiny Desk a couple of years ago, and then I think Master P did the BET Awards for hip hop's 50th birthday or anniversary or whatever, and so it was all of these things where like my childhood, my first concert was the Hot Boys, right? And
hmm
thinking about in some ways my love for Lil Wayne as a lyricist, but also how problematic he is. And just so many things that were, I thought, coming out of the Gulf South, even thinking about, Meg the Stallion and her ascendance in terms of women in hip hop. And so I invited a couple other scholars to co-edit. One is Dr. Jennifer Morrison. She's at Xavier. And initially I asked A.D. Carson, who's a phenomenal hip hop scholar. He's credited, I think, as the first person to have a hip hop album as a dissertation. But he's a professor at the University of Virginia, I think. But he had so many projects that he was working on that I asked him instead of co-editing, would he just write the afterword? He agreed to Dr. Regina Bradley, who many of you know from chronicling Stankonia and her work with Southern hip hop, is going to write the forward. And so that collection is really it's on the back end. I mean, the essays have gone through a couple revisions. We need to kind of do a final read through and send that over to Dr. Carson and Dr. Bradley so they can start on things. But hopefully that'll be out in the world next year. And then, of course, just the monograph that has changed names about 1,000 times, but in search of our mother's folklore. So hopefully I'll get a decent draft of that finished up this year as well. Those are the main things I think. Academically that keeps me busy, but hopefully we'll do some exciting stuff for the book release for Get It While It's Hot. So be on the lookout for that.
Great. All right. So now we get to the portion of the questions that I ask every guest. 1. What songs got people on the dance floor when you were going out dancing at your peak?
Okay. Yeah, so this is actually dovetails with the previous question in the sense that the No Limit Reader is very much inspired by what now if you anyone from my generation from my neck of the woods, when you hear
Cash
uh
money.
yep for the 9-9 that is the soundtrack to our, kind of, I was gonna say squandered youth, but yeah, that is. I mean, listen, Cash Money and No Limit were in heavy rotation. I was a huge fan of Mia X. Not that she had that many dance songs though, but really Southern
Yeah.
hip bounce music was just huge because I went to an HBCU in Mississippi. I'm from
Yep.
Mississippi, We had much, we had access to, we could go and see the Hot Boys or No Limit artists fairly easily in ways that we couldn't access other folks. So yeah. So back that thing up is the soundtrack.
Yes. What is a Black cultural work that's a classic but is underappreciated?
Mm,
Any genre, any medium.
I think I'm going to say, because I was just talking about this yesterday, I'm going to say Tony K. Bambara's The Salt Eaters.
Mm,
I think that it's underappreciated because I don't know that one, people teach it that often, and I don't know that it's read as often as it should be. And part of it sometimes is the narrative perspective kind of shifts throughout or that it seems almost like what we call stream of consciousness. I don't know if that's exactly fair or accurate, but I think sometimes readers get lost in the narrative, and I think that's easy. But one of the things that the novel does so well is, it starts right with this woman asking another younger Black woman. She says something like, "Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well?" And so this idea of wellness and wholeness and healing and how do we get there and communal wellness, I think is so central to that book and central to Black folks. And one of the things that I do in my non-existent spare time is I'm a, I'm a group fitness professional, and I was creating I started having some mobility problems. And so I haven't been able to execute this vision just yet. But I still, like I taught a chair aerobics class today, actually. So,
mm,
but it was creating a group fitness platform that was inspired by soul and trail line dance. So, not a line dance class, but a certification for instructors. So, just like Zumba is inspired by Latin dance, I have group fitness instructor friends who are like, I'll do the training. So, I've created a curriculum that's based on line dance so that we could
mm,
see that in gyms, right? And my thinking was because line dance and other types of dance, right? It doesn't just have to be line dance, but thinking about diasporic dance traditions, they are cathartic, and there's this sense of like healing that happens in this space where you're coming together with community, and you can kind of forget your troubles, you can pop your fans, you can do, the electric slide or whatever that is.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think, to go back to the question, Bambara's novel really asks the question or makes us think about, do you want to be well? Because that requires some deep introspective work, right?
Yeah. And finally, what particular dish did your family make that you looked forward to the most?
Ooh, this is such a hard question. Oh my gosh. Maybe I'll say my grandma's dressing. I mean, there are different people have different ways of, they put their own spin on. Actually, you know what? I take that back. I'm gonna actually say sweet potato pie, and here's why I say
Mm,
that, because and I don't actually know which recipe my grandmother used, but I still, when I experiment, I try to stay as close to what I imagine her recipe is, because my dad cooked and sold miniature pies, and his sweet potato pies were good, but to me they had too much nutmeg, and I don't like, now when I see a recipe or when I get ready to make one, I'm like, I don't want that hint. Like, I can put nutmeg in there, but it can't overshadow the other the other flavors. And so I'm always trying to really basically edit recipes that I find to the point that I'm basically trying to recreate my grandma's recipe, because of course your grandmas don't be writing stuff down. They're just like, oh, sprinkling sugar until the ancestors tell them to stop or whatever. And so I mean, sometimes there are recipes, but often there are not. So
yeah, yeah.
I find myself trying to recreate the perfect sweet potato pie. And every holiday that I do them, people are like, oh, these are really good. They taste different from the last time. Like, yeah, they do, but you just eat
Well, Dr. Constance Bailey, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed this discussion. Where can folks find you?
it. So I can be found on mostly Instagram. That is probably my most social media that I'm on the most, at Constance the Academic, and it's ConstancetThee, and then academic is spelled AKADEMIC. So nod to my sorority. But I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm on all the things, and generally, if you search for my name, it's Constance Bailey. You can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, but yeah, Instagram is where I'm usually at. So And then you can also visit my website for any information on, my scholarship research or, speaking engagements, just constancebailey.com.
Great. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care. I want to thank Dr. Constance Bailey once again for a great discussion. You can find her at her website, constancebailey.com, as well as on Instagram, where she's Constance, the academic. The has two E's, and academic is spelled AKA at the beginning. So Constance, THEE, AKA DEMIC. And also, again, be on the lookout for her multiple books coming out, Get It While It's Hot, In Search of Our Mother's Folklore, and The No Limit Reader. I think the lessons are pretty straightforward. I want to hone in on the part of our discussion when we talked about the importance of preserving physical culture, given formal attacks on history, but also preserving digital culture, where everything is moving towards subscription. You don't own anything anymore, especially what they call content, and it can be taken away at any point. But by the same token, we have to be wary about the digital because of an example I gave was digital blackface, people trying to pretend to be black, people using black images, likenesses, words, even videos to try to trick people into thinking they're black or adopting black personas. So yeah, the full lesson is preserve physical, preserve the digital, while remaining skeptical and wary of digital black culture as well. That brings me to a curious thing I found. Someone recommended a YouTube channel to me called The Hungry Historian, where they have tons of videos about black soul food, history. They have AI generated thumbnails, of course. I believe the text of the videos is AI generated. I've checked through multiple sources and that appears to be the case. And I also think the voiceovers, which is supposed to sound like black people, is AI generated. So it gave me weird vibes off the top because I knew it was all AI. There was no person in it. They're talking about these are our elders' recipes and all of this stuff, speaking as if they're black, but there's no person on camera, which immediately raised red flags. I go to the website that they have, thehungryhistorian.com, and I noticed that they're selling actually a cookbook for $17, like a PDF cookbook of recipes, claiming that it's our black elders' recipes, Big Mama's Soul Food Kitchen or something like that. And what really irked me was that in the frequently asked questions, a lot of them seemed geared to elder black people. One of the questions was, can I afford this? I'm on a fixed income. Another was, well, what if I'm not good with technology? Is this easy for me? So clearly they're trying to target black elders who don't really have the, savvy and discernment to distinguish between real and AI online. Not to focus on elders, because a lot of young people these days have problems with that as well. But it really upset me. Then I go to the footer of the website and it lists the company that produces it called Hiraya Media Limited, HIRAYA. So then I get my Columbo on and I search for the company. I see that it's based in Cyprus, not in America, not in any black country, but in Cyprus. And that the names of the people, they seem Dutch to me. And all of the research that I found online, none of it suggests that they are black. Their photos, everything they have posted about them, they're not black Americans, certainly. And they, in all likelihood, I'm about 99.9% positive they're not black at all. And if you look at their LinkedIn or just information available from them online, their specialty is digital automation. So their job is to create AI slop. And it appears that they've done it with the Hungry Historian YouTube channel and book that they're selling and trying to pass off as authentic black cultural knowledge. So again, you have to be really cognizant and vigilant to try to spot digital blackface and these people trying to use our cultural cachet and our thirst for our culture to milk money out of us and scam us, basically. So these people are playing in our faces. Please don't let your elders be tricked by this. I'll have a link to this post that's going to be on the Soul Food ETC website. Just wanted to tie that in to the concept, a real life example of the growing problem of digital blackface. As always, please subscribe, like, rate, review, visit the website, blacketcpod.com. Until next time.